Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Indiana State Police Roadshow. I'm your host, Sergeant John Perrine, the Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police Indianapolis District. The Roadshow is brought to you by the State Police Alliance and Cops for Kids, a subsidiary of the State Police Alliance. For more information about our sponsor, visit www.indianasfinest.com. We want to thank Eddie Garrison, who's producing this show for us from MS Communication and Network Indiana, getting us on the radio across the state of Indiana. Our good friend Tom Trio, who puts all the content on YouTube, does an amazing job. If you're surfing YouTube, like my kids like to do, it seems, land on the Indiana State Police YouTube channel, and you'll find a lot of really cool stuff there, a lot of cool content, historical content, current content. You could spend hours watching, just like I'm sure my guest Captain Gallivis does on a nightly basis.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. I refresh my historical perspective of the agency that I've worked 30 years for.
No, the reality is it is cool that somebody's documenting that and we're able to capture that. And my other guest here is First Sergeant Brent Gullinson from the Indianapolis District. First Sergeant, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Always happy to see you, my good friend. And he's here today to talk about a unique role that he has played on the department for the past several years, actually most of his career, and that is as a hostage crisis negotiator. Kind of a unique position, and you've been in some situations where you've needed to use that training. But let's just kind of start with what is it that you're trained to do in a crisis? Sure.
So I've been a hostage crisis negotiator for 12 years, and what we do is one of the biggest aspects we do while in dealing with a situation is active listening, right? So active listening is important not just for hostage crisis negotiations, but for everyday life, for marriages, for kids, for any situation in law enforcement. We deal with traffic stops, you name it. So it's really great training that we go through, not just for these situations, but anything we do in life, really. It's really a great experience to go through it.
So when we hear about negotiations and we think about the ability to talk, the ability to communicate, but that's just a really small piece of it. You got to have the ability to listen and to interpret things and to interpret body language.
Absolutely.
All of these things go into a successful conclusion.
It does. So what we do in most of these situations we end up on is we're dealing with someone that's having potentially one of the worst days of their life. I mean, the police are there. They're in a very emotional, stressful, mental state. And our goal, our objective is to bring them down to that factually based, rational state to try and bring everything to a peaceful conclusion, not only for us, but for them and their families.
Yeah, and the goal is to utilize whatever tools we have to make sure that everybody's safe. The person, the victim, the suspect, the police, we want everybody to have a safe resolve. And we hear the title hostage crisis negotiation, but not only is it not just for hostage situations, but it's actually rarely an actual hostage situation. You're called in to deal with maybe somebody who's barricaded themselves, maybe somebody who is suicidal or having mental health issues that just needs some communication.
Yes, that's correct, John. So we oftentimes it's not a hostage situation. It is someone that is having a bad day, maybe thinking about harming themselves, committing suicide. So we talk them out of that situation, get them down again into that factually based, rational state, try to get them to see the big picture of things, of their life and how important they are. But we also deal with barricaded individuals, like maybe our SWAT team or somebody's there to serve a warrant and they don't want to come out and go to jail that day. So they will put themselves in a room in the house or just lock the doors of the house and not want to come out. And our job is to come and convince them, talk to them about coming out of that residence. And that's to bring that to a peaceful conclusion, because SWAT has most times, or police officers in general, the right to go into that home with a warrant. However, that's not our goal. We want to resolve the situation peacefully and try not to cause damage to their property in the process as well.
Yeah, and again, the number one thing is keeping people safe. And Captain, we recently did a show about recruiting and ISP and opportunities within the agency to do some different things. And this is one of those unique things that a lot of our troopers, a big amount of our troopers actually participate in.
Right. You know, and this is really one that obviously, unfortunately, didn't come up in the list of opportunities, because it's one, like a lot of the things that we have on our agency, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of behind the curtain. You know, you know it's there, but sometimes you kind of forget until it's really needed. So how do you see what it is that you do different? Because again, so much in law enforcement is the way the public sees us is predicated on what they see on TV or in the movies.
Sure.
So how does that kind of affect what you do?
Oh, it affects it greatly. So what they see on TV and the movies is a fear of SWAT knocking the door down, coming in the house, dragging everybody out in handcuffs, or injuring somebody in the process. So a lot of what we have to overcome is their fear of what's going to happen if they come out. Oh my gosh, you have all these police out there. They all have guns pointed at the house. They're a bunch of emergency lights. So we try to diminish all that as much as we can to get them comfortable. But if they've seen that movie or TV show like you're referring to, that's one of those hurdles we just have to talk them through and ensure that if you listen to our instructions, you will come out safely, uninjured, unharmed. Everything's going to go smoothly. But you have to listen, right?
Yeah, the perception of a lot of what we do comes from movies and TV shows and documentaries that people see. But the reality is it's an active negotiation. Not necessarily, hey, bring me a pizza, bring me cigarettes, do this, or you guys aren't setting a deadline saying, okay, if we don't have him out by 9 o'clock, we're going in, right? It's kind of an active evolution of events to determine how the resolve is going to happen.
Absolutely. Every situation is different. All the training that we go through, yes, on active listening and how to deal with people with these different mental disorders and everything we go through, until you've lived through trying to be in one of those situations to talk to somebody, you really can't truly understand and grasp how to handle that person. Because even though the book says do this, well, maybe that person's slightly different. Right. Maybe they require a different kind of attention, or how you speak to them. So and cultures come into a big play. People's backgrounds, are they former military? You name it, we have to take all that into account when addressing them. And the one thing we won't do is lie to them, because we lose that trust. And not only that, but we're dealing with them today. Well, what about the police agency that's going to need to deal with them tomorrow or next week? Sure. We want to instill that trust in law enforcement. Sure.
Yeah. So what is like some of the longer ones that you've been on? Not specifically what the thing was, but I mean, have you been where it takes hours and hours to where you're bringing in other negotiators?
Absolutely. Yes, we've had various situations where we've had to do that. One in particular was in Cloverdale back in June of 2015, where I believe the negotiation went on for upwards of 14 hours with a gentleman and his girlfriend and a baby. Child Protective Services was there to try and remove a baby from the business that he owned, and he wasn't having it, so he barricaded himself. And it took several shifts of negotiators to be able to resolve that. And
does your thought process change pretty rapidly when you do determine that there's a hostage or there's innocent victims inside? Maybe not necessarily hostages, but innocent people inside.
Absolutely. These weren't necessarily even hostages. This was his girlfriend and his baby, 14 days old, I believe it was, or so at the time. And we have to take all that into account, because anything we do tactically, putting gas, or anything tactical, cutting the power to make it warm in there. This was the summertime. Sure. We have to take into account, well, how's the baby going to be affected by this? How's the girlfriend going to be affected by this? But certainly when there's a child involved, we need to take that into consideration.
And do you have pretty good success once that communication is open of keeping that communication? I mean, I feel like you guys are successful more times than not with getting somebody to peacefully resolve.
We are. Generally speaking, the longer a situation goes, the more likely we are to resolve that peacefully, because the more time we're going to have to talk them from that emotional, stressful state down to a rational state. The things that are hurdles that we deal with that substance abuse, drug usage. So if they have easy access to a plethora of methamphetamine or heroin, whatever they might be using, that could really create a roller coaster ride for us when dealing with this person.
Yeah, and when we're looking for candidates, Captain, for this position, for a negotiator, maybe talk about some of the traits that are important for not only a person but a trooper to be able to do this.
I think many of the similar traits we look for in those candidates to apply to the state police. I mean, people that are patient, they're calm, they think quickly and effectively on their feet. They have very good problem-solving skills. Now, I get that, you're not going to solve a situation in 45 minutes with commercials and everything else, but having an understanding, even some life experience in handling, interpersonal skills. Because again, like you said it very well. I mean, everything we do in law enforcement is 100% communication. Whether it's verbal or, well, in your case, it's got to be verbal because they can't see you, more than likely. So, I think those are some of the big characteristics of somebody that would apply to be or try out to be one of our crisis negotiators. I'm sure there's others, but those just to the top of my head, and that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, and again, it is a unique position. But talk about kind of you're on call all the time, essentially, to be available. What are some of the things that you might get called out? Because it's not always just a crisis situation. Maybe a warrant service or something.
Could be a warrant service. We work very well with our tactical team, SWAT, to go out and serve some high-risk warrants. They will have us present just in case it does turn into a barricade, or if there's a bunch of people in the home and turns into a hostage situation potentially. We're on scene already to start addressing that. Sometimes we'll make the announcements for them to come out with some language that we're trained to use to try and make them feel comfortable coming out. But yeah, we'll get called out for pursuits. Sometimes if they end, if a pursuit comes to a conclusion, the person has barricaded themselves in a vehicle or has run from a pursuit or situation and put themselves in a house or apartment. Now it's become a barricade. So you name it, we've been called out to it, generally speaking. And our goal, what we bring to the table is our ability to take the trooper hat off. I'm not First Sergeant Brent Gullinson when I'm there. I'm Brent. Let's talk about what's going on today, just like you and I would be talking over a cup of coffee in the morning, so to speak. You really got to lose that edge as an officer when you're dealing with these situations as a negotiator, and just become, I would say, as close to their friend or their buddy, their relative as possible, and understand what would be a trigger. In other words, what would raise their emotion, and get to know them enough. What would be a hook? In other words, what would help bring this situation down and calm it as best as you can.
Yeah, and do you get some unique requests sometimes, like from them, like, I want a helicopter, or I want this or that? I mean,
Absolutely.
You're trained to deal with that, but I'm sure you get some of those really outlandish requests.
We do get those requests sometimes. And even sometimes if they want something as simple as a pizza, that can be a challenge for us. But we'll check on that. We're not in charge of the scene. We're not the commanders of the scene. We're the negotiators. So everything we do, just like in most law enforcement functions, we're going to run through our chain of command. And that's essentially what we tell them. And
have you been able to use your training in this kind of outside of this, maybe just in your day-to-day encounters with people?
Absolutely. Actually, shortly after getting trained as a negotiator, I was working the road at the time. I went to a domestic involving someone that was suffering from emotional disorder, bipolar, and we were just done training on how to deal with these people that schizophrenic, bipolar, how they have maybe these things that are real to them, but they aren't, they're illusions essentially. So I was there by myself dealing with this person until another deputy got there actually that day. And I was able to just listen to them. And their reality was my reality. I didn't tell them the illusions they were dealing with were, oh, that's not true, that you're crazy. We don't use things like that. We treat their mental state as it's their reality.
Sure.
So it's going to become our reality, and we're going to talk them through all that. And that was used almost a day or two after that training, ironically.
Wow. And again, so there's way more that goes into it than what we see on the movies and on TV, where you toss a red phone into a door, right? There's communication techniques.
Or you have a fully fueled jet on the runway ready to take them to
a suitcase of $1 million.
But it is unique, and it's one of the many unique things that Indiana State Troopers do that maybe we don't advertise, we don't talk about, and you rarely hear about it because it's not the part of the process that people listen to or that they hear. But it is part, and we use time to our advantage, and we slow things down.
Absolutely.
And because the slower that we can move through those situations, keeping everybody safe, the more clear decisions we can make and things like that.
Yep.
So very unique. Well, thank you for coming in. And
thank you.
We'd like to also remind folks that the Indiana State Police is currently hiring. If you want information about hiring to become an Indiana State Trooper, visit www.indianatrooper.com. Captain, we got just a minute left here. Just real quick, give folks kind of an idea of this hiring process, what they can expect, and how they can get in.
Right. So the process is open. It's open now until about the middle of October, with the 85th recruit class set to begin in early February. So even though there's a couple of months left to get an application in, everything is online. It's been streamlined. Talking to our recruiter here just recently, we're going to start some testing, some physical fitness testing and written testing here in the next couple of weeks. So as you get your application submitted, or you suggest to somebody to get their application submitted, they're going to get a very quick turnaround. And if they get through that first portion of it, they'll start their testing right away. So
Great.
We're going to hit the ground running.
Well, thank you. If you know anybody that would be a great Indiana State Trooper, encourage them to apply. Encourage them to visit our website. Encourage them to contact us or a recruiter with their questions. We'd love to have that conversation with them.
Absolutely.
I want to thank the Indiana State Police Alliance for sponsoring our show. Thank our producer, Eddie. Thank Tom Trial. Everybody buckle your seatbelt, drive safely, and we'll see you next time.